Is your business run like a family? Is your family more like a business? Could I be any more cryptic in this opening? Today we're talking about family businesses and the good, the bad, and the better. You thought I was going to say the ugly. There's no ugly in family business. We're going to talk about all that on this edition of the Inside BS Show. Hey now, I'm Dave Lorenzo. I'm the godfather of growth. And here with me today, of course, is Nikki G. Hey, Nicola, how are you today?
Hi, Dave. Doing great. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. So I know that this is something that really resonates with you because growing up, you just had to walk down the hall and there was Gary Gellermino and the family business. So this is a topic that is really close to your heart, is it not?
Oh, it sure is, Dave. Well, and remember, I was there watching my family build this business from the ground up in the basement of my childhood home. So I remember day one with nobody there. I remember the first salesperson that was hired and the move to each building. So I've lived all of this. So I'm very excited about today.
All right, so let me ask you, Nicola, when you were growing up, when you were a kid, let's say when you're old enough to kind of know what's going on, like I would say maybe 11, 12, 13 years old, did you view there like being a difference between dad, the business guy, and dad, the dad, or was he just dad and there was like a whole continuation of business and personal?
My dad was pretty consistent. Like I definitely have litigator personality and outside of the courtroom personality. My father was pretty consistent. Like he was the same person, I think, for the most part at home as he was in the office. Let me give you an example. You know, you've got something going on in your life, you've got a problem, and he was kind of less about like, let's talk about your feelings and, well, we need to solve the problem. So tell me how you're going to solve this problem. Because as you know, entrepreneurs, like that's what they do. They're problem solvers. So he's given me a lot of great skill sets as a child, early child, that's for sure. Moving into adulthood.
It sounds like every discussion you and I have ever had. So every discussion you and I have ever had, whether it's where should we park the car to where do you want to go to eat is, so what do you want me to do about this? Like that's like, let's get to the bottom line here, right? And that's how both of us are wired. And it's because of growing up in business, in a family business. So let's bring on our guests so that we can talk about this dynamic and so much more as it relates to family businesses. Nicola, why don't you go ahead and introduce everyone to our guest today?
It's my pleasure to do so. So our guest today is Oscar Paez, and Oscar is a global family business consultant, a CEO, and a master scuba diver training. I would say he is the most interesting family business consultant you will meet. So without further ado, let's bring on Oscar. Good morning, Oscar. How are you?
Good morning, Nicole. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. What a pleasure to have you here.
No, pleasure to be here. And I know you guys have been talking a lot about family businesses and how to work and navigate through them. So it's an honor for me to be here.
Awesome. And who better to do this with than someone who lived a similar experience as I did growing up, which led you, I think, to get into family business consultancy. So that's where I'd like to start. I'd like to start with, you know, you became the CEO, I believe, of your family business. So tell us like how early on you started and what your experience was like.
Oh, I know. I mean, it is definitely, it is very close to my heart. And I've been in family business. I guess I was born as part of a family business. So my grandfather started an agri-industrial business back in the days. Then my father left the business, never actually worked with him, and started his own company. And I guess I was playing between bushels and corn and all these things. We started a feed manufacturing company in Colombia. So it's been there. So yeah, a lot of the things that have happened, even though I've mixed into finance, business, M&A, definitely comes from having been part of that system. So yeah.
And then how many years were you part of the family business before you went off on your own?
Depending on who you ask, but and how many times I've quit. No, I guess technically I started once I graduated from college. I knew I had a family business. I was in Miami. And I decided to move back to Colombia and join the business because I had done an internship with Merrill Lynch, working with families in wealth. And at that point, it was like, oh yeah, my dad has a business, so I'm just gonna go. And they decided to make up a position, which I later then realized, and this is one of the big issues that you see in some of the family businesses, and they brought me in. At that point, also my uncle was working with him, engineering, like some just really interesting dynamics. So that was the first time I quit after a year. Came back, did my master's degree, also an interesting experience. Worked with some conflict resolution stuff. It's like a multidisciplinary degree where I was able to see the influence in between politics and economics, and then it was talking about family businesses. So it's an interesting mix. At that time, I did work for a non-for-profit. It's called Ecologic Finance, or back then it was called Ecologic Finance. Now it's Root Capital, which is actually led by the son of the former president of the University of Miami. That they were talking about how to finance coffee in the region with families that were growing coffee. So it was really interesting because I've always worked with families, around families, and then I ended up going to Credit Suisse First Boston to work with family offices in the region. So it's always been like that. Then went back again to the family business at some point under a very particular circumstance. So I decided to go back to Colombia at some point within my finance career, and my father, he got half of his face was paralyzed. So he kind of asked me to stop playing banker and come join him. And then, it was an interesting negotiation process because he thought, is one of the other things that we see in the practices, they often want to pay salaries according to market value. So he was like, yeah, this is all going to be yours in the future, so I'm going to pay you like minimum salary. I do have my own finance career. So we ended up negotiating something that was clearly not market price. But I ended up accepting it, and I was happy to do so. I mean, it's a long story because then I realized that he was selling the company, and it's a huge. So I don't know how much time we have, but we probably could do a complete episode of this, and I think that's the idea. I think the idea is to really give some of our listeners and viewers insight. So to answer your question in a long, short way, I think I did 3 seasons. So this is like any Netflix family business story. And I, in total, worked around 7 now, but I've been actively involved in different ways, right? Family businesses, you always talk about the 3 systems, and it is, technically, it's the family system, the business system, and the ownership system. And regardless whether you're involved in active management, a lot of us do have to be part of this business because, I mean, we continue to be part of the family. We may be either a beneficiary or an owner from the owner's perspective. There's a trust structure or something like this. And well, some of those that ended up working and have worked for the business, and I still have now an active, more of a board sort of governance role. I am part of that. So working for the business, I think I worked 3 times. My last role was the CEO. I worked on the governance side, so I've been part of the board. We have boards in some of the business, and we've had also advisory boards within that I've been part of. And I'm part of the family, so ownership group as well. So it's I've been in those different roles, multiple different lanes. If that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like you have seen all different aspects of this business at different points in time in its journey and in your own journey. So that's really what I wanted to highlight. So thank you for that. Dave, let me go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, so Oscar, you brought up something really interesting as you were describing the dynamic between you and your father. And you said that, my father wanted me to come into the business, and because I'm his son, although I thought I was going to get paid market rate, he didn't want to pay me market rate. Let's highlight that, not specifically to rub salt in your wound, but to highlight some of the ways that the relationship exerts pressure on the business, right? Now, people ask me all the time, Dave, what makes family businesses different? And the point that you brought up in telling your story, this is it. Like, you can quit, or you could get fired, but you're still somebody's son, and that somebody was still your former boss, and they may try to bring you back again. Talk about that dynamic and how the family, the blood, creates pressure and enables this dynamic to take place.
No, it is. It is one of those things, and I think it's one of the important lessons that I think I've learned and I've been practicing in my role. And some of your previous podcasts, we've talked about talent, like bringing talent. It's not only outside talent. How do you bring your own family talent into the table? Because at the same time, like, if I'm able to go outside and get a work like it was in Wall Street, I've done some of the stuff, and I come back here, and he was actually offering me a salary which was lower than my allowance back when I was in the States, right? And so it just made no sense. And it was so funny that it was like, okay, Dad, so how does this work? And
Hey, you get the salary, but you got to cut the grass too.
Oh no,
Part of the
I didn't talk
negotiation.
about stories. It was funny because it was one of the first issues that we had. Like, how do my father, being a larger owner than my uncle, he would ask me to go to the farms and check on the farms, and my boss was my uncle, and that generated a lot of conflict in between them. So no, I mean we can talk about stories all day long, but it is very important, right? We need to understand that if you're a family member, you are also an employee, and some of these family don't really like to hear it. And right now I'm working with a family that are like, no, I'm not going to work for anybody. It's like, yeah, you're going to work for your family. Therefore, you need to follow the schedule. I mean, I know you've heard and I've heard your podcast where you talk about clear roles. How do you have this? What are the roles? So what are compensation, so on and so forth, and we talk about family employment policies or family policies, and they need to fit within the corporation and the corporate work. So yeah, no, I was never paid market rates, and that was one of the biggest issues. And I did get some perks. Now it also, those perks bring issues, right? Because at some point, family members feel that because they're part of the family business, they can take a longer vacation, they can show up late, blah 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 blah. And this is not the reality. You're an employee, and whether you like it or not, you need to understand that if you want to be part of the system where you're working for the business, well, you need to adhere to those rules, right? So it's super important.
So there's two things I want to pick up on, Oscar. First, because I think this will make you feel better about your salary negotiations. There was a summer that my brother and I were tasked with painting the side of the building. No role is beneath you when you're working for a family business, and you have to do that role with pride. So we painted that side of the building all summer. The second thing I wanted to pick up on was you're talking about how you really can't treat family members different. And Dave and I have had conversations about that. So I do want you to just elaborate on that a little bit more in terms of how that could impact the culture of the organization. So you're having these discussions, right, about how long is the vacation going to be, or with you or other family members. But I think a big takeaway for us has been how that can impact the culture if you do provide additional benefits or leniency to family members compared to other employees in the organization.
No, great question, okay. I mean, culture is everything. I think values, and I often work with generational family businesses. So one of the things that I love doing is just helping these families thrive through the generations. And at some point, I was all about keeping the business in the family. I think now, as I've grown and understood also, multi-generational wealth doesn't come from just the business. So at some point, people may need to exit, right? And it's very important to understand and honor the fact that they need to go have those exit strategies. Look about either do we continue on this business? Are the newer generation members looking to change something, right? And we, as a family, you need to understand it. But culture from it's one thing is from a founder to a second generation. And they're very, it could be very paternalistic or maternalistic depending on who is the founder, right? I mean, you do have some women-led business and women founded, and it generates certain dynamics that I've seen it even in certain where they actually lend money to their employees, right? And they're not banks. And I remember once I worked into, once again, my family business, but I've seen it in other, because I've also worked for other families in business, right? So I've been in all of the 7 intersections of the tree systems. How it does affect, right? So one is from the family perspective, and there is 2 views, right? Either the father that is over, father or mother that is over, they want you to be there before everybody, leave after. One of my things, my salary was nothing. He really felt that I needed to work 24/7, and I did. But he wanted me to go to the factory at Sundays or holidays, and it was I can be there. We have technology. There's a lot of technology that I implemented back then, which was a big issue that now he sees in his control room with 70 something cameras, and some of the people are there. For them, because when he lives in between a couple of cities and he's just watching, he's this big room where why did you pick this up? Why are you not doing this? And it's scary that he has this. So very interesting. But back to the same thing is like either you can lead by example and show good things, but it can also be the opposite, right? It's like then you put so much pressure to your family members that they have to be this exemplary way of doing things that you can make them become a family business consultant. And so it is a completely different thing. But on the other side, I had this family in that I worked a few years ago. They had sleep disorders, and the founder would come in and he would start attending, like having the meetings around 4 p.m. And it was crazy because he would have all his employees would start working at 8 a.m. They would come in and he would get here at 4. They would have to stay in line to wait for him until whatever, like 11 p.m. And as the transition was going to the next generation, well, the son, he also had this sleeping disorder, but we were trying to figure it out because the whole company couldn't work around in their own schedule, which they were very, very like night owls. And we need to say like either you bring somebody else or you figure something out because you can't continue because this is going to affect the organization. So, and I can give you plenty of examples on how culture affect the organization in multiple levels.
So, Oscar, you mentioned your family business. What industry was your family business in?
So originally we were in protein production, but we have pet food, real estate. We have poultry, which that one was sold, and we also did the commercial feed rations. So like kind of Purina sort of company, right? We manufacture horse feed, cat food, swine, everything, you name it. Nowadays we're mostly into layers, so egg production, but commercial ration.
Is there a tendency for family businesses to be in one industry more than others? Do family businesses tend to, like, for example, do family businesses show up in agricultural industries or manufacturing industries? Is there any tendency for family businesses to be in a particular industry?
No, I feel that, I mean, I've worked in multiple industries. Clearly, agro-industrial, depending on the family, a lot of them started there or they have some sort of influence there. Also real estate. But I think it's like, when do you, and I have this concept like, this is a family business, but this is a family enterprise. Like, when do you switch from being a family business because you created a business to create wealth for your family, or really like economic support for them, right? And then when do you turn into an enterprising family, which is, regardless of what the business is, will look for a different industry, right? Now, clearly families, and we talk about, this is another interesting approach from my practice, is we talk about the polycapital approach. So, me back in 20-something years ago, we looked at the net worth of the family only at their assets and the financial base. Now, I think nowadays you have to look at the polycapital approach and what's their real wealth, right? Like, what are those key competencies they can use in other industries if they actually decide to sell the business or buy another one. And you always hear about like if you're concentrated, you can do a lot of wealth creation, and then you kind of diversify to maintain your wealth, which is true. But a lot of these families have been able to create a network of businesses where they support each other, so they're able to grow organically. And there's another family that I work with. They started also agro-industry. I worked with a lot of them, and then now they have a transportation company. They have restaurants. They have the meat production. They have a port. So they have different things that are added to each other. But at the end of the day, and then like the sister decided to study architecture, so now they started a construction company, and it really depends on the family. But it varies. I feel that you find family businesses and everything. It's changed a little bit now with the new age entrepreneur or the next generation, where we are often seeing that the capital was coming from somewhere else. So you have these people that are really all about the exit, right? And now that's one of the biggest challenges. How do I keep my next generation wanting to be part of the family business and not wanting to start their own startup like I did? I actually at some point had my own startup and wanted nothing to do directly with the family business. So you have to navigate all those things. But family businesses come from anything. I mean, and the dynamics are the same, whether it's a little small mom and pop shop or, Walmart or Cargill, some of the largest private companies in the world.
one of the things that we've seen in working with business owners, and it is a natural for family businesses, is that all of them get into real estate in some way, whether they need a warehouse or they need a manufacturing facility or they are in retail. They all realize at some point one of the avenues for us to create wealth for future generations is going to be real estate, and we can own the real estate, lease it back to this business, and if we ever decide to exit, we can still own the real estate. So is that, like, in your experience, are 90% of these businesses somehow tied to real estate at some point?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think it's also because it comes from the family, right? I think most families, because there are certain cultures that do feel that owning a home is not necessarily the first thing that they want to do. But as we grow, I mean, the first thing we want to buy to our family, give our family, is a roof, right? So that's when you start getting into real estate. It's like you want to buy a home, you want to buy a car. But yeah, I think in the wealth progression, which we call, it's like, okay, the business, it really also depends if the business owner, it's more business, or like, what does he want to focus more on? But most likely they will get into real estate at some point. I have a funny story about also when I worked with my father. So we owned the real estate, and he always said that he would probably make more money renting the real estate that we owned. It's like near an airport. And I told him, that's fine, just value it, see what's the market price, and if we can't pay rent for this at market values, then we'll either move the company somewhere else or make decisions among like those wealths. And it is, I've gone into some families that actually their net worth within real estate is largely when you compare it to the business, and they may have like I'm working with a family right now. Their revenue is $1 million revenue. Now they're 7th generation family, and they have very large real estate, and they have very large ranch, which is worth millions. And it's, how do I maintain? I mean, this asset here, it's producing X, Y, and Z. If I sell this asset, I'm going to be able to put it in the stock market or any other investments and produce 10 times or 20 times what I could do with my business. So what do I do? Now, they want to keep the family business, and how do we mix it? And there's a lot of conversations that we need to have, which is one of the things that I do. You know, I kind of facilitate conversations to figure out what makes sense for the family, the business, and the whole system itself. So
I want to zoom out for a moment, so to speak, for our audience, Oscar, and I would like for you to highlight the key areas that you focus on, because you work with so many family businesses. You work with family businesses across the United States, across multiple different countries. So when we kind of put that work into buckets, tell our audience, like, these are the few areas I really focus on, and then I'll have a follow-up for you in one of those.
Thank you. No, I mean, I think it's evolved and changed, and I think it's all about motion and evolution. I started from the finance world, and I was coming from M&A and family and wealth management, right? So when I started this work, which I still do, and I love it, and I guess I've come back a little bit to that, it's when families have to make a decision, not only sell their company, but any big decisions, you need to align the family in order for, one, to facilitate the work for the advisors that help them. Because I've gone into businesses that do M&A, or they do other stuff, or they need a lawyer, and they just can't make up their mind, right? And it's like very frustrating. I know, I think at another podcast from you, Dave, you talked about how maybe a family member, and it happened to me in my M&A world, somebody can just decide not to sell their company, even like having everything signed, and there is a lot of family emotion. I had this issue with this other family that I had worked with. We had sold one of the largest beverage company in a country down south. I'm not going to say names because it's a very large family, to another really wealthy family in another country, right? It was about a $400 million transaction. Everything was ready. We had signed everything. And the day of the actual finalizing the transaction, the CEO calls us in the morning and says, guys, I have bad news. He's like, okay, what happens? I mean, are you sick? Are you not coming? You know, we can't sell the company. And okay, well, this is we're signing today. You know, this is going to cost you a lot. And you know, my mom had a dream last night, and my dad told her not to sell the company, and deal was off, right? Regardless whether it was right or wrong, it was just this family emotion. So it's dealing with those family emotions a lot of the stuff that I do, facilitating those. Also, a lot of the founders are deeply ingrained with the identity of their. I mean, my father is a great example. He's always worked from 5 a.m. to whatever. I mean, he only knows that he's him, but it's really deeply related to what I call my big sister, the company, because it's just the preferred child, right? He doesn't play golf. He doesn't have any hobby. He actually just works and works and works, and his identity is tied really deeply. And how do you have those processes of helping those founders do a transition? We don't really call it succession anymore. We call it transition because it is a process where you need to start working slowly but surely, and the soul has its own speed. And how do you have those conversations to be able to do it at some point? And so may decide, like, I want to die running this thing. Okay, fine, good. Let's talk about it and let's figure it out, because it might be the way to do it, right? But as long as you prepare for when you die, because it's very responsible that I think that some of them do say, I want to die running this thing, and then just kind of leave it, because there's so many implications, right? You need multidisciplinary approach. You need lawyers. You need trust and state. There's so many disciplines that need to kind of interact. That it is, and I'm getting, this is all family business. So I love what I do, so I kind of go in tangents. But I do this. I do a lot of conflict resolution. I do innovation and entrepreneurship. So we talk about entrepreneurship a lot, right? But since we want to keep the family's wealth within the family, how do you support a strategy to support the next generation that wants to do entrepreneurship, innovation, and you keep the wealth within the family? And when I'm talking about wealth, I'm talking about like the knowledge. Also, some of the things like people that come from family business are more likely to be entrepreneurs because this is what they've seen, right? And how do you do that? And the other thing that I work a lot is what we call impact. And impact, it's a lot of the philanthropic work, good business practices. So do like a B Corps, or how do I understand all the stakeholders? How do we do advocacy, and how do we do also investments like sustainable investments, but I mean, not from the Greenpeace sort of way, but it's like, how do we do this kind of thing in a more progressive way, in a regenerative way? So that's one of the things. And I do use a lot of technology and other things that are more non-typical for your day-to-day consulting gigs, right? Now, do I do it myself? Not everything. So we always work in a multidisciplinary approach.
Yeah, and you can hear it in your response that a lot of this, overall, strategically, you are planning for the future of this family business in a lot of what you're doing. So I do want to ask you this, when you come in, what's your approach? Because you can handle so many different aspects of the family business, from the dynamics to the impact. So when you come in, what is the approach in terms of where am I going to start with this new family?
No, I think it's really important to really do a diagnostic, right? It's interesting because families don't often agree or want to pay for a proper diagnostic. Now, at some point in my career, I kind of knew what it was, but you kind of would figure it out in the way because things will come out. So usually when they call us, there's two types of clients, right? They'll never tell us what the real issue is. So maybe something else. They're like, we want to try this. No, we're thinking about whether we buy or sell, or whether we do this. And there is really something else that is really the underlying issue. So what I like to do, and I think it's very responsible, is just going into the family system, because we work for the system, not for an individual. And we'll try to have as many interviews from the system, right? So I always like to try to have initial interviews with the family members that work in the business, whether they're owners or not. Owners, other advisors, employees, to be able to get a perspective from the different, like a 360 approach, right? Ultimately, there's a lot of system theory behind what we do. And I also use, and I bring technology in, so there is some communications, and I use assessments like the DISC assessment, and I actually use Enneagram, which it tells you a little bit of the personality. So I use different assessments to understand the individual, and some of the key factors of communication and ways of the conflict resolution. I've actually started using something which is really interesting, is like, how do people learn? So there's a quick assessment where a lot of people, even myself, I'm more of a viewer, listener than book reader. I came to realize that I had ADHD while I was in high school, and this is funny, but the way that Latin mothers treat ADHDs not with medicine but with force. And you know, we're here in Miami, but the flying chancleta is a reality, it's not a myth. And that's how we treated ADHD. And later on, I came to realize that I learned better by. So when I buy a book, I buy the audiobook, I buy the book, and I actually have to follow the thing because you know it was harder for me. And I've excelled in academics at points, but things that I really enjoy. Clearly, English literature wasn't my best subject when I was in, but I was able to learn. So for me, trying to figure out how people learn from the family systems makes my job easier because maybe I need to just do a podcast for the next generation, or maybe even for the older generation, because they're what I call the legacy generation, because they want to sit down and read anything. They rather kind of hear me talking, and they feel that I'm talking to them. So it's important to learn, and I think some of those are really interesting. Some of the things that we will use, there's a Lego methodology, or there's where you kind of put little toys and you see different dynamics, which is part of like the constellations, and it gives an X-ray of how people are seeing this from the different perspectives. So we use tons of tools.
All right, so I feel the need as the Latin American translator of the group here. I feel the need to translate for our audience the flying chancleta because my wife has introduced me to this concept. So for those of you who don't know, my wife is Ecuadorian Cuban. My kids grew up speaking Spanish. We speak Spanish as much as we can in the home. My kids don't answer me in Spanish when I speak to them in Spanish, but my wife is fluent. Y mi suegra is also fluent, and she's the one who introduced the concept of the flying chancleta to our family. So for those of you who don't know, a chancleta is a flip-flop, and because we live in a tropical climate, we tend to wear chancletas all the time, and it's very easy to take them off and chase people around the house with them. And when the kids get fast enough so that you can't catch them, that's where the flying chancleta comes in. So for those of you who don't know, in a Latin family, the flying chancleta is a very common thing. So that's the 1 minute version of discipline in a Latin family for those of you who are unfamiliar. So Oscar, thank you. This is the first reference, 800 shows, Oscar. This is the first reference ever to a flying chancleta. One side of my family could not be prouder. I promise you that right now.
It's like a boomerang, right? It's like somehow they have this great skill of tossing it away, but it's interesting.
The level of accuracy is unbelievable. It is an incredible skill that is probably passed down from generation to generation. So the flying chancleta is something that everyone should familiarize themselves with. Oscar, let me ask you this question, because you've referenced a couple of times trusted advisors to families. So for us, when we're working with family businesses, it's inevitable that we get involved with the person who's the CPA, the person who's the accountant, and also usually the lawyer, right? And it's usually, of course, there's a corporate transactional lawyer, there's a person who handles the business stuff, but the estate planning lawyer plays an important role in protecting the assets from outside forces as well as from taxes. Help us help our friends who are advisors and the people we work with who are advisors. What do lawyers, accountants, and other consultants, financial advisors get wrong? What do they underestimate when it comes to family businesses?
Please blog the comments because I'm gonna get a hammer from this. No. I think lawyers. Especially trust and state, and actually I was at a family gathering in San Diego the other day. One of the board members is a former corporate lawyer, which was like very lawyer structure, corporate, former head of a very large corporations, and now he understands the whole dynamic of family business, like how to empathize, how do you really put yourself in those shoes. Now I know, and I've had the fortune and really the honor of being able to work with two of my mentors, which one came from the European school of thought and the other one came from the American school of thought. And there was difference. Like at some point, U.S. or some consultants or some advisors, kind of the first thing was like, just get everybody from the family out of the business, and that's always the first advice. Like, no, because then it's no longer a family business, right? Like, that's what it's the fuel, and or just sell the company. And I think selling it's a valid option. And trust me, I've matured on this because I would want to do anything I could in order to keep the family within the business. But it is an option, but it's not the first option. Most people, I think, most family business members would, if you ask them, okay, if you didn't have this conflict, would you sell the company? And most of them might say they would say no, right? So I think and it's also because most founders or people in business don't really know how to explain to their advisors what they want. So most often than not, I may have a family member that would come and ask a state lawyer to maximize their tax efficiencies, which is fine, and it's very important. Now, they'll do that, and they'll become, and I mean, if I would have known better, I maybe would have become a tax lawyer, even though I wouldn't enjoy it as much. I think it was much more profitable because there is great savings. They do a great job, but they'll do what they ask. Now, the founder never said, do maximize my tax efficiencies, but keep my family together, right? And that takes a different thought process, because you come into nowadays with like the global community. Dave, you're talking about like how, you know, I'm proud to be a born Colombian, but I'm more American in a lot of things. I ended up going to like a boarding military school. I mean, I have different things in my background that you may come into like multiple citizenships, and with the families that I work, may have, I mean, 3 passports, and what are the tax implications in this place? So some families use the trust in order to take ownership, but then how do I develop emotional ownership? So if I'm not really an owner, I'm just a beneficiary, how does that affect the people? And what do I need to do if we actually do this? Because it's fine, it's an option to do it. How do I generate that emotional ownership from the family members? So it's really think about the family and like understand all of the systems that are around, and definitely make sure that they don't only do what they're really good at, but they do that and understand the family, right? It's like, how does this kind of create conflict within the system? And that's the most important thing. That's why I actually advise a lot of advisors, because we do some workshops to help advisors understand that it's not about just doing whatever they need to do, because if they do it as a regular corporation, they may be missing a lot of value, and they may actually be getting their clients in trouble in certain things that they don't realize. But if they did take these things into consideration, their job would be much easier, and would definitely create a bigger and a stronger tie with their own clients, because they really feel understood, right? So it's kind of a virtuous cycle, and you can do it as an accountant. It's like, yes, I understand. Also, there's a lot of people that kind of do try to. There's family businesses that end up trying to mix their families and their business accounting together, and at some point it's like, you can do it, it's a good practice, but how do we really properly divide things? Even though it may be good for tax purposes, then how do you explain if you're going to sell the company? And so there's a lot of things that that you need to keep in mind, and it's not always about planning on tax purposes, but plan from like family needs. I think you talk about, and once again, to me, the family is important, then the ownership, then the business. You need to think of them as different systems, and then as the individuals that interact with them, right? Because as I said, I mean, even within my own family or the families, the tax implications of something happening to my father would be different, because we have different nationalities. Like my son is he was born here, he's American, we're dual citizens. Some of them have a European passport. So how do you understand these things to really effectively help the families?
I'm so glad you mentioned this aspect about the advisors some of them stepping in and treating this as just a regular business. So if you are out there listening and you're offended by that, you need to be listening to this, because, Oscar truly gets this, that a family business can't be viewed and treated the same way as any other organization. There are very unique dynamics there that go on with the family. And I think I mentioned, Oscar, to you that Dave and I now run a meeting similar to what you're saying, where we help advisors learn how to work with family businesses. It is a family business meeting that we host monthly for that purpose, for the educational purpose of helping those who want to work with family businesses truly understand the best way to do that so that it serves the family well and it serves them well as an advisor moving forward. And we also work with family businesses in our firm that we've built. So again, so important that you've highlighted that, because you cannot treat these the same, and you really have to understand everything that's going on, that holistic approach that you're taking, the interviews that you conduct. I mean, you really get in there and truly understand who am I dealing with so that you can be the most effective consultant that you are in that space.
It is, and what you guys do is great, and I think there's other organizations that help, advisors understand. I think there's FFI, there's FFB, and there's different things that are out there that can help understand those dynamics. Now, do you need to go as a lawyer and start asking about the secrets in the family? Maybe not, right? But how much do you really need to know? Like I go really in depth, and I really go. But just having an understanding. Also, like if it was your own family, what would you do, right? Like ask yourself that question. If I wasn't a family business, and a lot of people come or have been involved with family businesses, ultimately, depending on the country, anywhere from 70 to 95% of the businesses are family owned. They started like that. They have some sort of dynamic, and their dynamics are the same whether they're a small business or a large multinational, multi-generational company. Now, does it get more complicated? It does. But also working with the small systems could get very complicated. Also, like even if you have, it's only two siblings, it's just a 50-50. Legally, how do we come to conflict resolution if we have an issue? We learn to be business partners with our siblings. So only childs have an issue of like dealing with, because they've never had to do it. That's the thing with my son. Like right now, I mean, locally from both sides, there's no thing. He wants to run the family. He wants to run the grandfather's company. And I'm like, good luck with that. But he's the only one, so he probably will do. But it really is learning to communicate. And there's things that from the advisory world, and I think the work that you guys are doing is great. Not only helping families, but helping advisors to understand the intricacies of the work that they do in the different levels. And really, I think, honestly, if there's one consultant that says that they can do it all, don't hire them. They're lying. And I love to see that you guys, like Dave and Nick, like ultimately, women are for Venus and men are for Mars. Like, we have different energies and different understanding. And this is very valid in the family system. It's like, how do you work? I usually like to work with a male and a female engagement, because we see things differently. We understand, we connect with different things, and we also may relate better with other family members. So it's super important. And I think there's families sometimes because of cost, they would want to not work with a team at least of two, and I think it's super important. But it's good to check it by the wife or the husband or whatever it is, because it is a different mentality and we see things differently. So.
Oscar, what are some of the groups and organizations that family business owners can take part in so that they can learn some of the different approaches? Because one of the things that we've found is if we have to educate people, it takes a lot longer for us to get involved with people. It's easier to get involved with people who've gone to seminars and who've been a part of organizations and learned some of the topics, learned about some of the topics, or learned some of the strategies that we've talked about. So what groups and organizations should family business owners belong to?
So for sure, look, one of the ones that I'm a member, and I'm an active member, but I've been a board member, and I was a board member in Colombia. I'm a board member here. It's the Family Business Network, right? This is an organization from families, by families, for families, that they help kind of understand these different dynamics. And it's a membership-based organization where, first of all, it's a non-solicitation network. So people don't have to be afraid that they're going to be trying to sell them anything and everything, because we do kind of respect and create that space to where people find themselves, one, that they belong, right? And sometimes can we get there very lonely out there in family businesses, because one of the questions that I get asked the most from my clients is, are we the worst family you ever worked with? And no, you're not. And we all have families, and we all watch Succession, and we all watch Yellowstone. I mean, it could get like that. And there's plenty of other shows that I can refer you to where you can actually see some things that are closer to reality than what you actually think of. But It's a network of help there. I mean, YPO, it's also one of them. But they're more for the individual, but they do have a family business now. Like FBN, it is for the family, and I think it's great. And that's the one I really. I know there's also a lot of academic institutions that have their own family business center, which would be great to be able to get something here in South Florida. But University of Colombia has one, Kansas State has one. I mean, there's a bunch all over there's a list of a bunch. If you guys want it, I can probably gather it up and give it to you guys. But it's a great resource. And they may differ, right? Some of them may provide consulting, some of them do education. I think online nowadays you can find a lot of resources, and it's important to educate. It is one of the pillars, right? In order for us to be able to help the families thrive, it's about education. Now, educating the owners, there is no such a thing as a master's in ownership in business, right? This doesn't exist. Most of us that go to an MBA or to go to law school or to go to this academic places are prepared to go into the corporate world. Now, when you go into the family business or a family business, whether you are a family member or not, because it's also very different to work for a part about talent, right? If you go work for a local based business, which could be great. I mean, we have a really great family owned business here in South Florida. You have, the mass corporation, and I can give you, Publix is family owned business. There's multiple family owned businesses that are great engines to our economy and the world economy. And they have a different kind of view, even though they may be more professionalized. It is different to work for a family business or a family member, even from a family offices, which are now in vogue. And this can relate with the wealth advisors. Once you've talked to one family office, you've talked to one family office, and hopefully they don't have multiple brothers and sisters working there, because it is different.
And that's something I want to pick up on, because these businesses are different from one family to the next, right? No family is the same. So the dynamics are very unique. So let me ask this, because you work with so many different family businesses, what does success look like to you? And I mean beyond the numbers, beyond the financials. Like, what does success look like to you in the family business based on your work?
Before I answer that, I actually forgot. There's also other organizations, but there's plenty of resources, and I think for advisors, there's also something like the Family Firm Institute, which is also a very interesting organization that kind of helps people understand those dynamics. But that it is. And to me, to answer your question, I think for me as an advisor, it's hard to go and say this is what we want, right? Because ultimately we need to be facilitators, and I can't, because sometimes we may go into to help a family with certain issue, and at the end of the day, the result may be selling their company, right? And it is just kind of honoring the fact that things evolve and change, and that's just a new change, and is the birth of a new wealth opportunity. Now, I think once people have those exits, family issues could become greater if they're not properly accompanied, right? And I do a lot of this. I do go with some of these families that they've never seen these amounts of wealth. And now they feel, because it's easier to divide the wealth, and maybe the founder doesn't want to, or whatever it is, it can generate greater challenges if you don't have the proper conversations before that.
Yeah, and that's something we absolutely see in our business and deal with, Oscar, which is what do you do after? Like, you've got to have a plan for after, especially if you're selling that business. What are the owners going to do? And what have we done to prepare for that wealth transfer so that we make sure they're best positioned to put that money in the right places and to make it last? That's a whole other, discussion and consideration that has to be made.
I think from the time perspective, that's like, to me, it's you have to honor the past, right? You have to lead the present, and you have to prepare the future. And then within those, how do you understand that everything affects everything else? And we need to keep it in mind in order to kind of help the family thrive with good communication, because I think most families fail because they have lack of communication, understanding, lack of empathy. I do a lot of conflict resolution, and I train in this methodology. It's called the non-conflict methodology by Million Peacemakers, which I'm also very involved with. And they teach you really how to have a open communication and have a better way to solve conflicts, even internal conflicts. Sometimes we may have an issue internally, and we're not really trained with those tools.
Oscar, is conflict resolution such a big deal in family businesses because the person who you have a conflict with can leave the business, but they can't leave the family. They're still blood, right? Is that why? Because I don't see conflict resolution in business looks like you're fired. That's what conflict resolution in business is. But in a family business, you can fire somebody from the business, but you can't fire them as your brother or your nephew. So Thanksgiving is still going to be Thanksgiving. Is that true?
No, I think it's important, and I think clearly, I mean, there is now from the public capital approach, and we go back to what Nikki was asking me, like, what does it look like like success, right? And I think it's, do we want to be more actively involved in philanthropic work? Do we want to be, so there could be conflict that are even from good things, right? Conflict is not good or bad. Conflict is just conflict. That's my first thing, right? And what, even there is conflict on the definition of conflict. So there's really 2 points that are, and maybe from the good perspective, I have families that they want to be involved in philanthropic work, or they want to be involved in good investment practices, and because of X or Y reason, they don't want to invest in weapons, or they don't want to invest in tobacco, or they don't want to invest in alcohol. And how do you have these conversations in order to kind of solve that? And what are we going to do? Very value aligned, right? Like, what's our purpose as a family? And we really need to, I would encourage a lot of families to do value work and understand what are their values, and then align from the values. And where can we work? What can we do good together? Now, it's clearly very important, Dave, that because at the end of the day, we still have to become, we go to the Christmas party and go to Thanksgiving. It's important to solve because we want to keep the family together. Now, most of us kind of solve conflicts in 4 different ways, and I think this is psychology. That's why it's so important to bring a lot of psychological tools or human understanding tools to this practice, because I'm going to ask you guys a question, and I'll take the mic from the other side. Like, what are ways that you guys solve conflicts in the day-to-day? What would be your go-to? And there is 4 of them, and we can kind of go through this.
With the way Nicola and I resolve conflicts between us, well, Nicole is just always right. I mean, there's no conflict. I just agree with whatever she said. No, I mean, I think both of us, the reason that our partnership works is because we both have different perspectives and we both have different talents. And for me, I understand that Nicola is extremely logical and extremely rational, and I am very, not just strategic, but I am very impulsive. And the reason that I want to work with Nicola is to balance that out. And the fact that I understand that about myself forces me personally to pause and say, all right, well, let me call Nicola and see what she thinks about this. And then if I can't get a hold of her and it's critical, I think to myself, what would Nicola do? And I try to approach it from that perspective. When I had my own business, that perspective was missing. And so the reason that I personally wanted to work with Nicola was to add that balance. And I never forget about that. So when we have a conflict, I mean, it can be frustrating because we're approaching it from different angles, but I always remember that the reason it's so important to have these 2 different perspectives is so that we balance the decision making. That doesn't mean that I agree. It just means that it's important that this perspective is there, and because I wanted this perspective, I need to respect the fact that we got to consider this angle because I'm missing something. I could have a blind spot. So that's, from my perspective, whenever there's something that we disagree with, I always kind of lean toward, I really need to make sure that if I don't agree with Nicola and we decide not to go in that direction, I better be right, because the reason that I want her in this business is because I was missing that perspective. So I tend to bend over backwards because I know where my blind spot is, and that's where I'm lucky.
No, and you guys are lucky that you guys understand and realize this. And you kind of gave it's a little bit of the conflict resolution approach, but there is a methodology to it. But it is technically any business of less than 2 or 3 families, depending on definitions, can become a family business. So this technically, you guys are a family business. because ultimately you all have your core families, and there are different needs. You said it, Dave. You know, we talked about the framing, and we all come from different framing. Even me, having been born in the same house and the same everything, my sister and I see the world completely different, which is also why it makes it very complicated to be in a business, because you know, maybe she didn't get any of the used bikes. I actually was the one that got the used bikes from my cousins, but um, it generates issues. It generates certain dynamics, right? It's so we have the framing. We all come from different cultural backgrounds, different. Now, I think clearly the way we saw our families solve conflict, and you see it. I mean, you talked about it. There may be either we kind of fly, so we fold, we use force, and we use the 50-50. Those are like the most common. And then the one that you were talking about is like, how do we kind of have a conversation, understand why, and there's a whole process about it. This is a methodology that I do actually do seminars on. Is like, how do you work the conversation? How do you empathize? How are you actually doing active listening? You know, so how do I listen to neighbor Nicola, or how do I listen to Dave, and really not be waiting to see what I'm going to answer and react, but is actually hear what he's saying and have good body communication. If I was like this here, kind of looking at my phone, well, clearly I'm not here engaged, and I have to show people that I want to be having a conversation, and ask that if we can solve conflict. So there is a way that I do actually trainings for that. It is important. So we fly, we fold, and they all have. It's not that there is any wood. Like clearly, when you were talking about, there is ways to solve. So at some point, I need to use force to resolve a conflict, because it's just an emergency, right? I can't just go and police force. Sometimes you need to go and use force. What are the pros and the cons? I mean, it is fast, right? If you use force, and then clearly in the corporate world, I mean, the way of solving conflicts is I'll fire you, it's solved. Now, does it leave resentments? Yes. It has winners and losers? Yes. If I fold, like if I all the time I say yes, you're okay, yes, for sure, I often expect reciprocity, right? So I often expect, you know, I folded on this when this happens in relationships. You know, I'm always going to the restaurant that you like, and then now I want to have a burger, or I want to invite my friend. Like there's something, I always expect something in return. And people don't really understand. And if this continues going on, at the end of the day, well, somebody's going to get some emotional frustration and say, you know, I've been letting you, whatever, fall asleep with the TV on for always, and then I can't. And this is something I know that it's a big thing between male and female. It's like, come on, today just kind of go watch outside, or kind of don't do it. I mean, we need to figure it out. You have the 50-50, which it's great. We've always thought since little, you know, sharing is caring, and, you know, with cousins, and like, you know, share with your brother, with your cousin, blah, 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 blah. And that's the way, I mean, usually the 50-50 is ingrained in us since we're very little. But what's the problem with this? It is, you know, there's not a winner, not a loser. And sometimes it may be, and I have the great example, at some point, those of us that cook and are trying to make a meal with the significant other, which I don't have one right now, so that's why I need a Nicola in my life to help me balance my practice and maybe all the other stuff. But you know, how do you go about making dessert and then doing the salad dressing? And you have this lemon, you only have one left, and the easy way is just to cut it in half, right? And then at the end of the dinner, you're sitting down having dinner, and then none of them are happy, and they're like, "What's with the long face?" Right? It's like, no, you know what? Like my dressing doesn't taste very well. I needed more juice, and the same thing. My dessert, my lemon pie, needed more zest, right? If we would have sat down and talked about it and said, you know, I need 100% of the juice, you need 100% of the zest, we could have solved this issue without having a 50-50. It's like what you do with Nicole. You have conversations, you understand that she compliments you, and we work from, some families work, or some persons resolve their conflicts well from the understanding of the worst case scenario, then their best case scenario, and what can we do together? And there is a whole methodology, and we can always do something if you guys want.
You know, your point about reciprocity is that's a huge point, because I think of it in business. I don't expect any reciprocity, because we're trying to move the business forward. But Nicola and I are volunteers in an organization, and the person who's the leader, who's the paid employee of the organization, when I was asking for something, said something to me where she said, well, I've given in to you. I've given you these last three things. And I said, she's like, so I expect this. And I was like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. There's only one person in this conversation who's making money off of us moving forward, and that's you. So you think you're giving in to me. I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't care whether we do it this way or not. So, because I have an idea that may be better than anything that you've come up with, that doesn't mean that because you're adopting my idea, I have to take your crappy idea for this other thing. Like I have no vested interest in this. So for us, and then I'll shut up and let Nicola give her perspective on this. She and I care about moving the business forward. And I would prefer if all the ideas came from Nicola. I don't want to be the guy coming up with all the ideas all the time. So, for me, what does reciprocity look like? Reciprocity looks like both of our bank accounts are full. That's what reciprocity looks like.
Yeah, there's definitely a balance here. You've got to work together collaboratively, and you've got to make sure that you're listening to each other. Like that was the biggest thing for me. So going back to the question you asked Dave was, we really had to learn to listen to each other, because you do have different experiences, you do have different viewpoints, and even if you're going to take a step back and say, you know what, you're right, or even if we disagree and say we're going forward with your idea despite our disagreement, you truly have to be able to hear that person out and say, you know what, we've both expressed the view on this particular subject, so we at least feel heard. In the end, you have to make a decision. And I'm with you, Dave. Like, we always choose what's going to be best for this business. And it's not about, like, whose thought was this, whose idea was this. It's about what's best for this business and what keeps moving it forward, no matter what.
Oscar, I'll tell you that so I was in business with my wife. I've been in business by myself. I'm tired. I don't want to be the guy that comes up with all the ideas. I want someone coming up with the ideas. I want someone on some of these issues to lead the charge, because if there's two of us focusing on issues that are going to make the business stronger, we get there twice as fast. And it took me 40 years to figure that out. But now that I know it, I would never go back to the other way, because I don't want to carry the load by myself. I mean, when I don't have to, that's just crazy to me. So, understanding that moving the business forward requires letting other people in and making sure that other people have an equal say. I think that's a better way to move forward. And I can imagine if you're in a family business, if you're the patriarch, how long do you want to carry this load? You're 60 years old, you're 70 years old. Do you want to keep carrying the load? Come on, let somebody else help you.
It is, and it's important. I think, going back to some of the families and family owners that are listening to us and seeing and watching us, it is also like that process of transition, right? I mean, and I do say also to the next generation and to other stakeholders, is like, we need to honor that. We need to honor the fact that these people worked and had this idea and these things, and how do you honor it, and how do you continue their legacy? Because I think a lot of this thing is about continuing the legacy. Now, how do we lead the future? Like today, we need to, as business owners, and that's why I'm gonna emphasize from the business, my role as a family member is to do the best thing for the business, right? Even if I'm within the board of the business or the advisory board, I may be representing my family, but I do have fiduciary responsibility for the shareholders, which are my family, but I need to make the best decision for the business and understand. Now, that's the other thing, we talked about governance at some point, is like we need to have business governance, but we also need to have family governance, which is completely different. And I would definitely recommend families not to go into, if you're having a family issue, don't bring it to the business. And I know it's hard because we all intertwine, we all wear different hats. And if you're gonna have a business meeting, don't do it in the dining room table on Sunday. Like don't do it. Get an office, get a hotel, go to whatever it is. Do something where if you're gonna have a board meeting, do it somewhere else. Don't tie it to the family. Also know when to say boundaries. So like I think it's a valid point, because we may have an issue like I don't want to share any of them, but there's issues that happen within the family system. I don't know. There is a lot of mental health issues that are going on nowadays and that affect the business. And now, they do affect the business, but they affect the family. How do I support my family member as a family member to work their issues out? And how do we deal within the business? And how do we also kind of understand the risk, the dynamics, how are we going to manage it? But do use different scenarios to talk about this, or like divorces, right? That I'm getting divorced, and it happened to me. I'm also like, that's why I have such a lots of experiences. Like, how do you deal with a divorce under a family business where you may be part of the ownership? Did you guys have to sign a prenup or not? I mean, there's a lot of issues before that you need to understand that, but they do bring emotional conflict because, I mean, I have my son wants to be the successor of his grandfather, and he's like, to me, good luck. But there is issues, and then also what it is that the other member, you know, either the family and the non-family member want to do, because they may feel that people come from wealth, but the reality is that at some point, it's not really yours. It might be in a trust. It might be something that you were gifted, and the expectation of getting something that is not you, even the owner, your spouse, and it generates a lot of tension. So there's a lot of things that need to be dealt in different scenarios, and with a lot of like tact and understanding of emotional effects. So yeah.
So, Oscar, you've mentioned now a few times our experiences and how our own personal experiences really inform what we're doing in our line of work. And I want to take this opportunity to make sure that we address some of your unique experiences on the personal side that have been really fun for you in life, that make you, I think, so unique for an advisor. And we talked about this a little bit with Dave before we brought you onto the show, and I want our audience to hear this. So among all the activities, I think you have a pilot's license. I know you've been heavily involved in scuba diving. Let's talk about the scuba diving. Like, you train people to scuba dive, which terrifies me personally. I would love to be able to do that, but it terrifies me. So tell me about how you got into that and what that looks like.
Oh, this is a long story, but yeah, it's shaped a lot of my life, and I think I've been lucky, and I'm truly lucky and honored, and it took me a while because I've done a lot of issues to do self-work, which I think is the first thing. I've done a lot of self-work to really kind of honor the things that I come from, this family that I come to, and I was able to have these things which were hard, and we had so many difficult issues as I was growing up. And there was trauma, but it's like honoring father and mother and just the whole system, and just kind of accepting and living in the present. Now, for me, scuba diving, I wanted to be an astronaut. When I was little, my nickname was NASA, because I just talked about, moon, and I ended up just being an astronaut with these family systems, which are very interesting to navigate. And they told me, I remember when I went to the NASA camp, the astronaut told me, you need to be a pilot and you need to be a scuba diver. So I started learning about scuba diving, which it was, to me, one, therapeutical. I'm involved with the Therapeutic Scuba Institute as a board member, and we help do research for these causes, more on the neuroskeletal and different disabilities. But I think, to me, the interest is more in the neurodiverse world. And there is effect. When you go scuba diving, there is PTSD. There's a bunch of stuff that have been researched. I'm not that researcher, so I'm just the lab rat, but it is interesting to see. And to me, it's therapy. Now, I do teach. I became an instructor. I'm a professional diver 10 years ago. I started diving, and please, I know Patty's not here, but I started diving in Colombia, like, without a license. Like, we kind of give you a tank, just like sometimes family business get tossed into their work, and like, here's your tank, go scuba dive. It's like,
dive in.
Just make sure you don't come, like, as we're going down, like, yeah, always breathe. It's like, it's some of the transitions, and I have a story about how my dad gave me his CEO seat like that. But when you go down, for me, it's worked as you're able to meditate or to have your own space, so you're able to have your help there. I do sometimes do leadership courses through scuba diving, which is interesting. Like a lot of things that I've been taught, and I think I wrote an article some time ago, is like, learning how to rescue somebody, learning that the responsibility of somebody is in your hands, knowing that there is a lot of risks that you need to understand. It makes you understand a lot of things about leadership and about risk and how to handle situations. Because the first thing they tell you, and the one thing I still use from my scuba diving and the rescue class was stop, breathe, and think, right? It's like, okay, assess the situation before you kind of go through things, and that's super important from scuba diving. That's like one of the biggest lessons. And if you look at the whole concept of scuba diving, which is self-regulated, you can technically do it. You don't have to have a license to do it. Please do, but you could. And it's the most irresponsible thing to do, to go and do it by yourself. You have no idea. And if you actually are a diver, but you dive like every 5 years and so often, like it's very dangerous because know your limitations. So know your limits. It's super important. And that's one of the like that I do it. So yeah, diving for me, it's amazing. I do it. I still fly, not as much as I want to. Yeah, there's a lot of stories here, so I don't think we have that much time. But I'll keep you diving whenever you want. I've taught many people that are very that being afraid of diving, because it is my specialty. I think when you understand, which I also use in my practice, and I actually learned it while I was going to my training as an instructor, people learn different ways. So if you're able to, one, give you the certainty that you're going to be okay, and I'm able to teach you in a way that is completely different, and you're able to feel comfortable. Also, like when we're in families in the room, so they feel comfortable and they feel they're safe, they'll be able to open and you'll be able to accomplish the goal. So it's a little bit of that same continuum to help families. So I think diving has been a lot for me. I love it. I did have a little incident a couple of weeks ago, so I've been trying to recover from that, and also kind of changing my lifestyle because I don't want to be in an airplane 24/7 nowadays. So I'm gonna probably be more here, locally based now from these things that happen. You know, sometimes we make business decisions as a family business because things happen to your own life, and I want to be closer to my own family, my own son, and I'm gonna be probably staying here more than what I did before.
That's wonderful. So I have to pick up on this. Thank you for sharing the therapeutic aspect of scuba diving, because I think most people view it as a hobby. And that was what really stood out to me from our conversation, is the way that, you know, it's really kind of influenced some of the ways that you think and the way you implement what you do in family businesses, is you're thinking about, you know, those principles that you've learned from being underwater and being able to meditate, stay calm, use the techniques to be able to clear your mind, take a breath, and use reasoning, really. So I really appreciate hearing that. It's wonderful what you're doing, and it's great that you are thinking about kind of, let me take a step back from all the travel and take a different direction in life. I think a lot of us get to that point where we say, this is too much, and we need to make adjustments. And you've had, you know, quite a career doing this work all over the globe. So it's okay to take a step back, take some of your talents here in the United States, and we're going to make sure the audience hears that Oscar's available for work here in the United States. He wants to do more business here and has a global perspective doing this in all different types of cultures and countries.
No, the therapeutic, sorry that I interrupted you, but I think the therapeutical factor is super important. I think often we're not seeing the individual. And whether it's scuba diving, meditation, cycling, yoga, whatever it is, right? I think we need to connect with each other and be able to live the present. Within family businesses is also like, how do I not, if I really want to be a singer or a dancer, that doesn't mean you're not part of the family. That doesn't mean you're not part of the business. I mean, I've seen good evolutions where, you know, transition and succession from the management point of view doesn't mean there is some founders that it has to be a family member or else they sell it. That's fine. I mean, they just can't continue, but they will not continue on the business. And I think if you're able to educate and use this holistic approach to understand the individual from their perspective and their, I guess, what they really want to do, and they find themselves happy, they'll be able to be better supporter of the systems because they're where supposed to be. So I'm nowadays, people ask me, oh, isn't it hard for you not to be the CEO of your family business? But I'm like, no, it's not. I'm helping families all over the world that impact the world in amazing ways. I'm happy that I'm actually having the best relationship with my father that I've ever had, as long as we don't talk about the business. And things within our family business have slowly evolved to where it's funny because he actually shared an article with me the other day that I'm like, yeah, wow, this is amazing that he was telling me, you know, most family businesses, blah, 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 and they need to, great, thank you, Dad. And before I would have killed him, but every family business has their own speed. We all, as individual members, have their own and be aligned with what you want to do with the why. Right now, Simon Sinek talks about the why. I think the why and everything in what we do as a family business, as we do as individuals, get connected. What's your purpose? And I think it's super important. And that's why I actually want to kind of have a different approach to my own practice, where I use technology. I use holistic approach from other things that may be seen kind of non-conventional and regular consultation. You know, I've been able to be a CEO for a family business. I work for other family business. I sold family business. I've helped with wealth. So I've had this experience that I can give to advisors and to families to help them thrive among generations.
All right. Well, Oscar Paez, thank you so much for joining us today. How can people get a hold of you if they want to connect with you? What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
So I'm old school, so I think phone works the best for me, and or text message or WhatsApp, because I'm always on the go. But it is 786-301-0303. Also, email works. I can share with you guys, and maybe you guys, I don't know how you post it, but you can probably put it out there. But I'm out there. You can Google me and anything. You can find me. I'm public, so but definitely phone number, email. It is really about. It's not about the business. This is about like building relationships in the long term, and trying to understand if you're ready, because the system, the family as itself may not be ready. Maybe just one. So you can start with having a coach, and I can guide the coach to start. And it's all about like finding momentum and seeing the right place for the family and the family members to engage. So it's like also another, like the flying chancleta sin compromiso, without any type of commitment. Really, we can talk, and I'm here to help anybody, advisors, families, having conversations.
So Oscar is the person who brought the flying chancleta to the Inside BS show. Oscar, thank you so much for that, and for the gift of the flying chancleta that people are going to take away from our time together today. It was a true pleasure having you here. For those of you who want to get in touch with Oscar, we're going to put all of his information down in the show notes. You can reach out to him and ask him how to duck and avoid the flying chancleta, or ask him any questions you have about a family business, about family business transition, about how to manage the family business dynamic, about real estate in a family business, about wealth management. He is a resource for you on a whole host of topics. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. It was great having you with us. We are here every single day on the Inside BS show. Join me back here again tomorrow at 6 a.m. for another edition of our show. Until then, my name is Dave Lorenzo. I'm the godfather of growth, and she is
Nikki G.
We'll see you back here again tomorrow, folks. Thanks very much for joining us.